Hello and welcome to the show where I try and make a little sense out of this stunning and brave new world that we all live in by talking to a series of expert witnesses about their experiences, interests and concerns. It's important in life to be in touch with your feelings, but it's also crucial to be able to back those feelings up with facts. And so the purpose of this show is to push past purely personal or political promoting positions, separate fact from fiction and fake news headlines in the hope of uncovering important home truths. And in this episode, I'm talking to Karen Straughn, who's one of the most prominent, outspoken and widely respected champions of men's human rights in the entire world. As one biography succinctly puts it, she is a mother of three who speaks out fearlessly on gender inequality with passion, intelligence and clarity, refusing to back down when intimidated by campaigns of hatred and misinformation. Amongst many other things, she is one of the founding members of the Honey Badger Brigade, a collective of women and men committed to promoting the interests of men and boys in a culture that has largely left them behind. She is a spokesperson for Men's Rights Edmonton in her native Canada, a blogger and a broadcaster whose YouTube videos have to date achieved over 16 million views. When you ask men's rights activists what it was that first inspired them to speak out and to champion issues experienced by men, by far the most common answer you're likely to receive is that they were inspired by Karen and videos such as feminism and the disposable male. I caught up with Karen while she was visiting Ireland to deliver the keynote speech in Dublin at a conference organised by Men's Voices Ireland. Our discussion focuses on the difficulties that fathers and sometimes mothers can experience when seeking to maintain contact with their children after a relationship breakdown. Themes explored include egalitarian monogamy, maternal gatekeeping, the evolutionary history of fatherhood, and the false allegation silver bullet that some parents are prepared to use to gain advantage in a criminal and family court system, which often facilitates an outcome where the winner takes it all. And inspired by an earlier conversation, I began by asking Karen what animal behaviour can teach us about the fact that some mothers, and sometimes fathers, are prepared to shut their child's other parents entirely out of their life.
Refresh my memory. Animal behavior, it's essentially Briffault's law.
Okay.
Where the female is the sex that decides the nature of the animal family, and where the female derives no benefit from the male, there will be no interaction between the female and the male. That's sort of a standard law of nature. Some people red pill thinkers have added an addendum to that, essentially saying that the promise of future benefit only works insofar as the female believes that you have the capacity to provide that future benefit, and it's contingent on how long they'll have to wait and how much they trust you to be able to come through with that. Otherwise, and so if you're a man and you decide to blow your entire fortune buying your wife and her mother each a house, they're going to come back to you a week later and say, well, but what are you going to do for me today? What have you done for me lately? And you won't have anything to give them. So you need to sort of trickle it out, bit by bit, right?
Okay.
All right. So, it's a very cynical way to look at things. But when you actually look at sort of animal behavior in terms of, males are... Fatherhood is pretty rare in nature. Fatherhood, you see it in birds sometimes and, things like that. But when it comes to mammals, it's actually fairly rare, at least the type of fatherhood that gets practiced among humans. So, investment, sharing food, all of that stuff. We have a unique brand of monogamy that doesn't exist anywhere else in the animal kingdom. It's called egalitarian monogamy. The egalitarian part of it refers to males being egalitarian towards each other.
Yes.
So essentially all males have at least some opportunity to pair up and have children, and this is probably what makes human males as cooperative with each other as they are, is they're not constantly in competition with each other over who can, get the most bitches. and they also things that have evolved in women to facilitate that. Permanent breasts, actually, they've become a sexual signal over time, but I'm pretty sure they first evolved in order to deter male sexual attraction. Because the only mammals that have breasts are animals that are pregnant or lactating. So you're not fertile. They're a signal of infertility and sexual unavailability.
Okay.
Right? In other animals. And we also evolved cryptic ovulation, which means we do not give big, blatant, in-your-face signs like a sexual swelling or, really, really strong pheromones to signal when we are fertile, when we're in estrus. And that brings competition and male-male violence way down within the group, right? Okay, and it also eliminates the ability of alpha males to mate guard, which means, because you can't have a harem and mate guard them all when you don't know when any of them are fertile. You'd be busy 24/7 just doing that.
Yes.
Right. So essentially we have this unique reproductive model. Women, I think, because if they're going to leave a man due to Briffault's law, they're not going to necessarily want the continued existence of that man as a complication in their lives to interfere with their relationship with their next man. And oftentimes, and I hear this from lots of people, oftentimes the new man is a primary instigator in the alienation of the children from the father.
Okay.
He will often convince the woman that, you should just forget about it. Why are you sending the kids to visit him? He's a bum, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of dynamics going on there that are that I think are part of our wetware, and also there's the aspect of in chimpanzees when they engage in warfare, intertribal warfare, they kill the males and they steal the females.
Yeah.
Right? And this also happens in, hunter-gatherer societies, any society where there's intertribal warfare. They kill the males, they steal the females. And females, I think, they've had to come to a place in sort of evolutionary terms where they can make an adjustment, right? Because it's for the same reason that mothers in the animal kingdom will commit infanticide. Males do it too.
Yeah.
Competitive infanticide, right? So they kill the offspring of the other males, which brings the females back into estrus so that they can plant their seed. If they don't got forever to wait,
yeah.
The next badass could come along and kick them out, and before they even get their chance, if they wait for these babies to grow up. Right, and but with female infanticide, it's always to do with resources. So there's a lean season, there's a scarce season, and there's a sort of an arithmetic going on, a calculation going on in the females, in the subconscious of the female, that if I invest in this child, we're probably both going to die. So I'll abandon the child and live to reproduce another day.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's sort of the calculation that goes on, I think, with females who end up captured by an enemy tribe. All the males are killed, and maybe all their children are killed. Because if they're infants, they're no good to anybody, and unless they're females close to reproductive age, they're going to be killed because you don't want the boys growing up and becoming a problem and all of that. So you have this idea of, I'm living to reproduce another day. This is my new situation now. And I need to leave all of that past behind me.
Yeah.
Right? In order to survive. And I think that has something to do with women and their propensity to leave a part of their life completely behind if it might cause complications. So
okay, because that's at the human sort of civilized level, you have, there's so much understanding of the importance of a father, even in a separated situation, and a consistency of
Well,
of a
it's
relation.
increasing.
Yeah, okay, but it's, I think, I suppose kind of the way I'd propose it is that instinctually that would seem right. Now, but, and yet,
Well, there's less of an evolutionary history there. We probably have only had that kind of involved fatherhood since, slightly before the Pleistocene, maybe as much as 2 million years.
yeah,
But it probably was something that was beginning prior to our ability to make tools and definitely before we had big brains. It's sort of all of these things sort of co-occurred. Walking upright happened probably first.
yeah,
And then our pelvis size shape changed, and to facilitate that, and then we had a crisis of obstetrics, which meant that, and we were living in a different environment, grassland. Food is not. It's a lot easier to stalk a mango than a gazelle, right? It takes a little bit more work, more cooperation. Females can't really do it when they're burdened with, with infants or pregnancy, and so they're relying on the males to do that, and then the males are relying on each other to do that, and that's, I think, when this sort of model of egalitarian monogamy was born, was because you really couldn't have a situation if the alpha male needs the cooperation of a whole bunch of other males. He can't hog the whole gazelle.
yes.
So he can't maintain a harem because he doesn't have enough, because he had to divvy it out to the others. And the others have a little extra, and they can actually find a single favorite female that they can invest in. So.
Well, okay. How about putting this right? So you may have the situation where a mother knows that it would be, whether it's morally the right thing to do or for other reasons beneficial for her children to remain in contact with her husband, but she decides to separate him out of the family completely, cut him out. Now, I suppose what I'm getting at is that just purely kind of very conscious selfishness in terms of making it easier for the mother in the new relationship, or is there something more instinctual?
I think that calculation probably occurs in the back of her head, where she's not really consciously making that decision, but then the front of her head comes in and makes up a story about it to justify it.
Okay.
Right? And I mean, it's amazing how malleable human memory is. You can plant memories in people. You can completely change. Every time you recall something, you're not playing it back like it's on a VCR. You're actually editing it every time.
Yes.
Right. And so it's very, very easy, I think, over time, particularly if you know what you're doing is actually bad, but you need a way to justify it, to actually come up with a narrative that will help you do that. And so you can say, well, he was never really good for the children, or he was a bad influence on them, or he was a bum, and I don't want the kids to be exposed to somebody who's irresponsible or whatever, right? He didn't really have that much to do with them anyway, all of these different things. And in some cases, a woman might say to herself, well, he was kind of emotionally abusive at times, and and the more she repeats that to herself or to others, the more she's likely to genuinely believe it. So, I mean, it's very, very crazy what people can convince themselves of if they have kind of that impulse that they need to justify.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, which kind of brings us on to the silver bullets, that concept of kind of in a situation where a couple are separating, and there become complications about rights to access or kind of parenting. Can you maybe kind of talk about what would be the purpose of? We're going to say women, but a man can do this as well. Obviously, what would be the purpose of lying about purposely and consciously lying about abuse?
I think it's maintaining control. I mean, like, one of the things that I've noticed about women are very happy to. A lot of women are very happy to do the 50-50 custody thing, as long as it was their decision, right? As long as it was not something that was imposed on them by the court or the system or whatever. Because as long as it was their decision, they can change their mind.
Okay.
Right? And they're still sort of in control of that situation. And I think that a lot of women really do want to. They want to be, after a divorce, they want to be in charge. They want to be the person making the decisions. They don't want to have to defer any of that to anybody else. So it's sort of like this idea of, I hold all the cards and maybe I'll be magnanimous with them. I think women really prefer to be in that position. I know I certainly prefer to be in that position. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean, like, I wouldn't have objected to the alternative. But it certainly does make me feel better about the fact that, I trust myself when it comes to calling the shots for my kids. I don't necessarily trust another person. Like when my kids were small, I barely trusted my mother to, babysit them. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you sort of, there's a lot of maternal gatekeeping going on there, and there's a lot of wanting to maintain control. So,
okay,
yeah.
And then how does society and, I suppose, state structures, particularly the family courts, how do the current processes advantage or disadvantage individuals in terms of playing it straight, in terms of...
Well, I mean, if you're somebody who's going to play it straight and your ex is not, you're screwed.
Okay.
Right? And even if you would end up winning,
yeah,
right, it's going to cost you a lot more money.
Okay.
Right? It's going to be a lot of time and a lot of frustration and a lot of money and a lot of worry and fighting and all of that. I had a combative ex. I completely understand why he was combative. He'd been divorced before he married me, and she took him to the frickin' cleaners. And then she continued to use the system in punitive ways after he and I got married, regarding, money and all. Money she arguably, well, not even arguably, definitely did not need. She had no need for this money. And she when she found out I was pregnant with my first child, she immediately applied to have my then husband's child support obligation increased, because she figured this is my last chance to actually get an increase, and so I'm going to give it a try. And lucky for us, it didn't work out for her. It actually backfired, but that was the kind of person she was. So when I asked him for a divorce, I think he was expecting me to pull some of that bullshit.
Okay.
And he kind of came out swinging, and, over time it got better. But it was, because of that, it was more expensive for both of us than it had to be, and took more time, and it was a little bit more acrimonious. Now, actually, it didn't take very long for us to become friends.
Okay.
Again, and decide that, we wanted to really. He had a role in his children's lives, and nobody was going to take that role from him, right? So, I mean, even when I got with the man that I'm with now, it was just very convenient that he's closer in age to my older boy than he is to me. It made the idea of him playing dad to any of my kids kind of off limits. It just wouldn't have worked. So we never tried. and the kids wouldn't have put up with it, and you know, it would have been a disaster. So I mean, we just decided that he was going to be like I don't know, play the role of a cool older cousin or something like that, and roommate.
Yeah.
You know, and
Okay.
that worked out really well.
Okay.
But yeah, it was when you look at some of these women, they really do want new dad to be new dad. I mean, that was one of the bones of contention while, you know, his ex was fleecing us for every dime she could. She was busy telling her kids to call their stepfather Dad and their dad Steve.
Okay. Yes.
And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me, bitch?" So yeah, it was. She was kind of the quintessential toxic ex, I think, in a lot of ways. So
yeah, we've heard anecdotes about that example of this kind of like television documentary where they went undercover, and this woman was repeatedly encouraged to raise those sort of issues. There is this kind of concept of a silver bullet in terms of family courts, in terms of accessing services. That there's a suggestion that a lot of services can kind of open up, and also kind of advantage in terms of the pressure that's put on the father. To what extent do you think the kind of state infrastructure and also the kind of charitable organisations that are there to support particularly women, to what extent do you think they encourage that as a pragmatic, in terms of if you're pragmatically sort of advising a friend, you would tell them how to game the system?
Oh yeah, no, lawyers do it all the time. They will, you know, repeatedly ask, "Are you sure he never hit you? Are you sure he never hit you?
Yeah.
Are you sure he was never emotionally abusive? Are you sure that you're not scared of him?" Right? And I think that there's like sort of there's an instinctive thing going on there sometimes too. You know, when I separated from my ex, he was like, "Well, I guess I'll go to a hotel," and I'm like, "What are you kidding? Like, why are you going to waste money on a hotel? Right? I'll sleep on the couch. You sleep in the bedroom, find a place, and then I'll help you move out, and you know, but you're not going to waste money on a hotel. It's completely ridiculous." And so then I phoned my closest friend at the time and my mother, and both of them asked. First thing they asked is he still in the house?
Mm-hmm.
And I said yes. And second thing they asked was, "Do you feel safe?" And I'm like, "Well, now I don't. Thanks. Like, what the fuck? I wasn't even thinking about that."
Okay.
Right? And you just stuck that in my head. Like, what is wrong with you? Right? And I was perfectly safe with him in the house. Jesus Christ. But I think so. I think that there's an instinctive protection there. There's an assumption that, you know, like I said, a woman in Canada doesn't even have to say he was violent to get a restraining order. She just has to say she's worried that he might become violent.
Yeah.
And given the statistics on sort of first incidents of family violence or domestic violence, you know, how frequently they actually occur in the process of a breakup.
Yeah.
Right? That the first, you know, like there's no history of violence in the relationship, and the first instance occurs, you know, during the breakup. And it's like, but part of me is thinking, well, of course it's going to occur in the process of a breakup, because men already know they're at a disadvantage when it comes to things like child custody and all of that stuff.
Okay.
Right? And if you're a woman, and this is, and I know that there are women who have done this, and it is just it's the sickest fucking thing. And I almost feel like they deserve to get smacked across the face when they do it, is they'll stand there and scream at him, "Get the fuck out, you're never going to see your kids again."
Okay.
Right? Well, you know, when you're existing within a system where the winner takes all, the loser gets nothing, men are they know they're gonna be the loser. And then they got the mother of their children screaming at them bullshit like that. It's no wonder some men snap and have their first instance of violence in those situations. But the issue, I think, I mean, it is a silver bullet. If you go to a judge and you say, I'm worried that he might become violent, then, you get de facto custody of the kids, you get the house, right? It might be, he might get his say, because all of this is ex parte.
Yeah.
He might get his say weeks or even months down the line, and essentially be able to prove his case that he's not violent. By then, the new situation is the new situation, and the judge is probably not going to touch it. Judge will probably just be like, best to just, the kids are settling into their new routine, best to leave things as they are, and,
Yeah.
and because there was an allegation of violence, best be on the safe side, better safe than sorry, so we're going to do supervised visits with dad, especially since the kids haven't seen him in 6 months, he's practically a stranger to them, and it's just, so, I mean, and then whoever gets the kids gets the alimony and the child support and and the 2/3 share of the assets and the family home. So I mean, there's a lot to gain from doing that. And I mean, there are some men who can game the system that way. And I was discussing this with Oren Amate. He's a professor of psychology, I believe, at the University of Ottawa. He said he's had women who've been just annihilated by the family court system in his clinical practice. And he said there's a difference between the men and women who come to me with this story. And he says, can you guess what the difference is? And I said, the woman married a sociopath, and the man married a woman.
Okay.
Right? You have to be you have to be a very, very charming, very manipulative, very cunning sociopath in order to be able to leverage systems that were built to protect women and use them against a woman. Because all of these systems, including alimony, including child support, including all of it, right? Those were built for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and that's one of the things is kind of like, obviously they come out of a need which is kind of genuine, and there are you are going to have sort of absent fathers who just won't contribute to children, and you will have incidents of very severe domestic violence. My perspective on this seems to be, particularly in terms of the serious instance of domestic violence, that in terms of the reality of how frequently that occurs in comparison to how heavily that is played upon in family courts and in the instances of kind of marital breakdown and child custody, there does seem to be a disparity in that. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, no. The response is the response is better safe than sorry. Nobody wants to be that judge who denied a woman a restraining order and then she turned up murdered. Yeah. Right, her and the kids. They don't want to be that judge who didn't take the full measure of what could be done to protect a woman who was making a claim of abuse or even just a claim of genuine fear. So there is that kind of idea that we react to everything with the full sledgehammer of the system.
Yeah.
And like, I can understand, if you're a judge and you're in that position, right? Can you imagine if you were that judge?
Yes.
Who said, well, lady, I don't believe you, and then, how are you going to feel? How's it going to impact your career? How are you going to be written about in the press? You're going to be hanging your head in shame for the rest of your life. You're going to have to live with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That guilt. So, I can understand the impulse behind it. I can even understand the impulse behind, the sole custodial / visiting parent model, right? So the idea that the person who provided most of the hands-on care, right? And dad wasn't really home that much anyway, just in the evenings, and all of that. I can understand the impulse behind that. But I think that those situations would be less likely to happen if we didn't have that winner takes all system. If if neither side had to worry about winning it all or losing it all,
Yeah.
right? That maybe we would not have so many of those instances of, you know, somebody completely losing their mind. And mothers have done this too. You know, particularly mothers who, you know, there are allegations of abuse. The allegations appear to be true enough that the father actually manages to, you know, to become successful in a bid to take custody away from her. And then she kills her children.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, I mean, we kind of almost, when those stories happen, there's almost an element of sympathy for her. In some of the news articles, the news reporting about it, there's never sympathy.
Yeah, it's reported very differently.
About a man who is facing the exact same thing, who loses his mind and kills his children and then himself, or kills his children and ex and then himself. No, he's just a monster. So,
yeah. Okay. Appreciate we're tight on time. Can you say a little bit about the you talked earlier about an extreme example where kind of somebody found you on Sunday morning and talked through. Can you say a little bit about that? Because I think that sort of highlights how so suddenly the wool can be pulled from a person's feet.
Okay, so I got a frantic phone call on a Sunday morning from a stranger. He's a guy in Saskatchewan, and I picked up because I thought it was Allison from the Honey Badgers.
Okay.
She's in Saskatchewan. And he was frantically asking for my help. His brother in my province, up in Grand Prairie, had called him from jail and explained, you know, like, I'm in big trouble, like, and here's what happened. And so this guy says that his brother, he was married for a few years and had 2 kids, and when the youngest was, you know, a couple years old, the wife, who had a drug problem, she just disappeared. She just up and left no contact information, nothing, and she was gone for, you know, 3 years or something like that. And then one night at midnight, she shows up at the house, and she wants to get back together. And the guy says no. And then she says to him, she gives him a sob story, you know, well, I don't have any money, I don't have anywhere to go, and, you know, it would be so great to be able to at least see the kids, you know, can I sleep on the couch tonight, and then see the kids in the morning. And he takes pity on her, and he lets her sleep on the couch, and gets up in the morning to get the kids up for school, and they're gone. They're gone, the wife is gone, the kids are gone, he has no idea where they went. He phones the police in a panic. The police tell him that, you know, when the local, there's like a neighborhood kind of community station,
Okay.
right? And you don't have to come to the main station. It's a community station. When they open at 8:30, you come in and fill out a police report, missing persons report. And so he does, and while he's there for like an hour and a half, you know, he's dealing with these cops. He's talking with these cops about his missing children in a complete panic, and he fills out all of the information, and then they tell him to go home, and they'll let him know. He goes home, there's cops waiting at his doorstep, and they arrest him. And the reason they arrested him was because in the middle of the night, the ex-wife grabbed the kids, took them out of the house, took them to a domestic violence shelter. The domestic violence shelter woke up a judge. The judge granted a temporary order of protection against him for both her and the kids. And that all happened before he even went to the police station. Right? The police all knew about this.
Wow.
Okay? And the problem was the reason why he was arrested when he went home was because he was in violation of a protection order that he had no idea was in place, because the domestic violence shelter was within 500 meters of his home. So without knowing it, because he's had no idea where they were. Without knowing it, he was in breach of the protection order that said that he had to stay more than 500 meters away from them. So he ended up, this is like Friday or something like that, and he's in jail over the weekend, and he's going to be arraigned on Monday, and the only advice that I could give his brother was to tell him to get a lawyer, shut his mouth, and sign nothing, right? And I told him, I said, they're going to offer him a peace bond. They're going to say, if you just sign this, everything's going to be fine. You're going to be able to go back home, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to tell him it's not going to be used against you when all of this comes up to a hearing, but it will be. It routinely is. It's routinely considered an admission of guilt. And so he's facing domestic violence charges because I guess when a woman brings kids to a domestic violence shelter in the middle of the night, the people running the shelter just automatically believe her, and they just take action. They go through the procedure, and there you go.
Yeah,
guy's screwed. So
such a complex area.
I don't know. I think it's pretty simple.
So what would your solution be?
Oh God. Like I would essentially say that if there's going to be an order of protection, there needs to be a hearing within 1 week. Within 1 week, that man should be able to answer the allegation that led to that order of protection. That would be at the very least. I don't think that you can get rid of orders of protection altogether.
Yeah.
But there needs to be, because I know in some cases, it's been months, sometimes half a year before the man actually gets his hearing where he gets to answer the allegation that led to the protection order.
Yeah.
So, and there needs to be, if that protection order is going to stay in place, there needs to be some actual proof that there was violence on his part.
And if that guy, if he didn't sign anything, but they let him out on the Monday, could he have gone back to his home under those circumstances? So
no.
He would have had to wait until, which could have been months, as you say.
Well, he probably, the police probably would have been willing to escort him to his home.
Okay.
Long enough to get, any documents that he needs, and maybe a few changes of clothes. But he would not be able to go there without a police escort.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that can happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, and she could just move into the house.
Wow.
Because he can't be there.
And obviously, you don't know about the. Well, I don't suppose you know of the outcome in that situation.
I don't know about the outcome. It was like it was just a frantic phone call. I gave the guy's brother the advice that the best advice I could give him, and hopefully things worked out not too bad. But who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
And purely supposition, but clearly that woman went with the intention of taking the children. It sounds very likely.
Yeah.
Would she have? How likely would she have been aware of? That process of kind of, if I go to this domestic violence shelter within a radius of his house, then he'll.
I don't know whether she planned.
That's...
that. I know that she planned to go to a domestic violence shelter and essentially get them to sign off on her kidnapping of the children. That's the one thing that men really lack in terms of services. Because I don't think we need as many domestic violence beds for men as we do for women, or even like proportional amount.
Sure.
Because I think that men probably won't utilize them to the degree women do. I think men want to maintain a sense of independence.
Yeah.
That would be maybe better served by giving them access to, counseling and legal clinics and hotel vouchers and legal aid vouchers and things like that.
Yes.
And that type of assistance, but where they get to maintain a sense of self-determination and autonomy rather than essentially living in a group home.
Yeah.
And but what men lack, because there are no shelters for them, is somebody to validate their decision to remove their children from a violent environment, right? So, they're stuck in that position. If they have an abusive spouse, they're stuck in that position of, they have three choices. They can leave without the kids, at which point they've legally abandoned their children. So if they try and get custody, that's going to be weighed against them. They can leave with the kids and risk a kidnapping charge because there's nobody with any kind of authority, nobody legitimated by the government to validate their decision to do that. Or they can stay and take the abuse and protect their children.
Yeah.
Right? And those are their three choices. So, like has been said many times before, men and women are different, and that they might need different things. Men, I think, need different ways of, different types of therapy. I don't think men really love sitting around and looking deeply into a counselor's eyes and talking about their problems. They deal with their problems in other ways that are more suited to them. And I think that domestic violence, a lot of men would deal with that situation in a way that, is different from what's there for women. But they definitely need services. So.
Well, that's the thing that strikes me about domestic violence shelters and this whole kind of, the concept of the safe space, and it has to be a women-only environment. Kind of, that all makes relatively, large sense. And what you're saying about, just purely in terms of kind of if a woman is fleeing violence, that there's a safe place for her.
Yeah.
And that men may not access those sort of services in the same numbers, even in terms of, kind of just how they would want, what sort of service they want. But everything that kind of flows from that in terms of the support services and the advice and all these things start opening up.
Well, I mean, this woman didn't go. She didn't phone the judge and wake him up herself.
Yeah.
Right. Those advocates at that shelter were the ones who did that. They had the phone number to be able to do that. They took her, to the judge. Right. They helped her. They held her hand through the whole process. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like those are definitely things that should be offered to men. And then vouchers for legal aid. There was a gentleman, I was at Canadian Association for Equality's drop-in centers, their main office. And they hold legal clinics there and support groups and things like that. But there was a gentleman who came in and he, described his situation, and he's an Indian immigrant. He is married, has children, and his wife's brother is living with them, and his wife's brother and his wife were both being abusive towards him, right? Like both.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like he managed to get a legal aid voucher and a hotel voucher, and so these different, and also be put in touch with different groups that could help him with just therapy and support and all of that. So I mean, like these are services that are needed. I just don't know that the sort of the group home thing is something that's really gonna be desperately needed by by male victims.
It seems to be particularly where men are fleeing with their children when they
when they need to take their children with them. But I mean, like even in this case, like I'm sure that this man, if he left with his children, he could go to cafe, and because they are a registered charity, because they provide these services, because they're recognized in Canada as doing those things.
Yeah.
Right. He could probably have, and I'm certain they have intervener status, so they can write amicus briefs and things like that. I'm sure that they would be able to help him fend off a kidnapping charge.
Okay.
Right. Because they're a charity, but they're recognized by the government as performing those services. So
yeah. Okay. One final question, because I'm pretty sure Outside of ideology, okay, can you think of any reason why domestic abuse charities that provide support services to women shouldn't or couldn't also provide the exact same service to men?
No, there's really no reason. Even if you sort of could accept their statistics,
Okay.
right, in terms of the vast majority or 85% of the victims or whatever it is they want to say this week are male or female rather. There's no reason to deny, and I tell interviewers this all the time. I was on some Ottawa radio station one day doing an interview, and the host was quite hostile. And, she says, well, but of course, you have to realize that 85% of victims of domestic violence are women. And I said, I'm not going to get pulled into an argument over statistics here.
Yeah.
Right? I think you would agree that one rape is one too many.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I think one man turned away from domestic violence services because of his sex, because of his gender. That's one too many.
Yeah.
Right? And it really doesn't matter the proportions of who's more likely to be a victim. If you're a victim, you're a victim, and you deserve equal services. So, I think that's really and one of the interesting things too, and the interesting thing is because this occurred in Grand Prairie, which is where that poor man had his horrific experience. I was doing a Q&A after a red pill screening in Grand Prairie, and a feminist who runs the local domestic violence shelter there stormed the stage, grabbed the mic, and instead of yelling, "You people are idiots and misogynists, don't you know that only women are victims of domestic violence?" She didn't say that. She said, "How dare you lie about our shelter? We do help the men who call us."
Brilliant.
Yeah, except for I went on the shelter's website. Not one mention of the word man, men, nothing, right? Just all about women and girls. And I'm like, how many men approach you? She's, not very many. And I'm like, yeah, you might want to change your website.
Yes.
Right? Because those men are so desperate that they're willing to go to a service that they're willing to phone a shelter that only serves women, that advertises it as only for women, right? Just to ask you if you know of anybody who could help him, right? They're not phoning to ask you to help him, right? He's phoning to ask you if you know anybody who could help him, right? And then you say, and then, oh God, what was one of the services she was so proud that she had provided for men? Oh, we routinely being 4 times over the course of a year, fly male victims down to the shelter beds that are available to them. Okay? So Grand Prairie is like 547 kilometers north of where I live.
Yeah.
And then the 2 available shelter beds in the province for men are 350 kilometers southeast of where I live.
Yeah.
So that really works well if you need to keep your job, right?
Keep the kids in school.
Keep your kids in school, all of that. So yeah, it's, but she was quite indignant that we portrayed her shelter as only helping women. So, given that that's now what they're defensive about, I think we might be making progress.
Yes.
So.
I agree on that note.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Karen.
All right, no worries. Thank you.
In the unlikely event that you're not already familiar with Karen, I'll include links to her blog and to her YouTube channel, and I'd also encourage you to follow the links provided and subscribe to Men's Voices Ireland on YouTube. As I mentioned at the start of the show, I caught up with Karen while she was in Ireland to deliver the keynote speech at their conference. Her talk was about proposals to change the law in sexual assault cases in Ireland, along with a summary of significant changes that have already been implemented in her own native Canada. And you can listen to that speech in full, along with other talks from that event, by following the links provided. And if that's not enough to keep you going till the next time, I'll also leave links to my new B-side channel, Blindsides, where you will find a lovely curated lucky bag of glass blind spot related outtakes, archives and oddities, including an archive of a radio interview Karen gave while she was visiting Ireland. Anyway, my thanks again to Karen for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you very much for listening, and remember, if you see an elephant,
can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.
The Glass Blind Spot is brought to you by you, because it's your views, your likes and your comments that keep this show on the road.